To round off our Formula E week of the Street Track Failure series, we're going back to where it all began. Of course, I'm talking about Beijing, and more specifically, the Beijing Olympic Green Circuit. However, despite it being the beginning of a new age in motorsport, and hosting what is potentially still the most memorable moment that the series has ever had in its history, it only held 2 races, from 2014 to 2015. The track was 2.1 miles / 3.4 kilometers in length, which is one of the longest tracks that Formula E has ever raced on. It also had 20 corners, with 13 to the left and 7 to the right. That being said though, a bit like the Berlin track that we had in the last episode, those statistics only tell half the story. In fact, with this track, I'm not even sure if it does tell half the story. Maybe just over a third of it perhaps, but a half? Well, I'll let you decide when we go over this track in more detail. Although, be prepared for me to use very similar terminology on a regular basis throughout the duration of this tour. On your way down the fairly short straight comes turn 1, which is a 90-degree right-hander. Because of course it is. I mean, it had to be really. A series that bases almost its entire track roster on street circuits obviously has to have its first corner on its first race event on its first track as the corner type that nigh on epitomises a typical street circuit, a 90-degree bend. It's nothing particularly dramatic either. There's a fair amount of room on the entry and exit, and the curb isn't all that punishing either. Not that we can say the same for other curbs on this track, but let's save that for later on. Turn 2 is also a 90-degree corner, but this one goes to the left this time. It was also one that collected a fair amount of damaged race cars in its time as well. However, once we've completed turn 2, it's on to turn 3, and 4, and 5, because we're onto a Mickey Mouse style chicane. I mean, it's practically the definition of it. You can see the huge expanse of road ahead of you. There aren't even any barriers either to stop you from cutting said corner. I mean, you'd obviously get a penalty, but even so, if I was told by someone to show them an example of a Mickey Mouse style chicane, then this is what I'd show them. It's a very tight one as well, a flick to the left before a pretty sharp left, and then another flick to the right again. Back on the straight, towards turn 6. I should though mention that for the second iteration of this event, the chicane was gone. Turn 6 is yet another 90-degree left-hander, but this one is a bit tighter, so can't quite carry as much speed into there. Just after the exit of this corner, the track width starts to open up again, but this doesn't stop you from encountering another tight Mickey Mouse speed breaker chicane. Once again, there are no barriers here blocking the straight that lies ahead of you. However, there is a couple of nasty curbs, one of which included a bit of grass just beyond it. This curb could grab a car if it wanted and slowly attract said car towards the barrier on the left-hand side, breaking suspension components in the process. At least there was a bit of a challenge to this chicane. Then after that is a small straight, although in reality this would potentially be one much longer straight if it wasn't for the next section. Another tight Mickey Mouse chicane. A right-hander that leads you into a tighter left-hander before another small right-hander brings you back onto a straight piece of road. Those chicanes would remain in the second iteration, albeit the first one would be made tighter still, with the exit curb being replaced with Tech Pro barrier. It's then another 90-degree left-hander that greets the drivers. Use as much of the track as possible to carry as much momentum as you can onto the next straight, although it was very much possible to loop it round at this section. A straight that isn't straight brings you to another Mickey Mouse style chicane. A fairly tricky braking zone thanks to the way the track angles left slightly, before you turn left, then right, and very gently left again, before you're back on the straight. Continue on said straight before coming up to another 90-degree left-hander. This was probably the trickiest turn on the track. The large amount of track width means that it looks as though you can get away with carrying more speed into there than you could. Get offline, and a Tech Pro barrier is waiting for its evening meal. Finally, it's down the longest straight on the track, that's not interrupted by Mickey Mouse chicanes. It's fairly bumpy, particularly the braking zone for turn 20, making passing attempts look a bit more dramatic. The corner itself is basically another 90-degree left-hander. I was considering whether I'd be able to get away with calling it a number that wasn't 90, but I can't. This section was also the location of the pit lane entrance, on an interesting pit lane that was rather long to say the least. Oh, and according to my notes, it says that a very dramatic moment happened at this corner. Apparently. Not sure what, but that's what my notes say anyway, but I don't know, let's just move on either how. After the crash on the last lap, the second iteration of the event would have a different curb profile. Then there's the pit lane in its entirety. A bit like the Cape Town circuit, it too had a hairpin which split up the garages into two, with one pair of teams on one side and all the other teams on the other side of a right-handed hairpin. Once you change car, turn left and go down the straight before a 90-degree right-hander puts you above turn 1. It's then a tight right-left chicane before you're put back onto the circuit midway between turns 1 and 2, on one of the stranger pit lanes we've seen in this series, let alone Formula E. With that, we've completed a lap of the Beijing Olympic Green Circuit, a lap that is a little repetitive. 2015 would be this circuit's last season. The reason they left isn't all that clear. It could just be something as simple as that the championship wanted to explore different locations. But the racing on this circuit wasn't actually too bad. Certainly in the second year, it was a pretty entertaining race, and the drivers seemed to like the changes that had been made for the Season 2 event. However, I'll just be honest, I'm not a particular fan of this track, and I'll summarise by posing this question to you. Which track would you rather see a motor race on? The Beijing circuit or the Cape Town circuit? With that posed, I'll leave this video here. Thank you very much for watching, and this concludes the Formula E special week of the Street Track Failures series, although there will be more circuits from this championship featuring in this series later on. In the meantime, if you have any other street circuits that you'd like to see featured in this series that weren't necessarily from Formula E, then say down in the comments section. Also, if you did enjoy this video, then I would be enormously appreciative if you did hit the like and subscribe buttons. With all that being said though, until the next video, be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day.